and I offer as evidence not only the presence and grief here of his natural family, but his greater family of friends.
Welcome Director Joe O'Connell to the stage. And Joe, I think you have a special guest too. I'm going to have you introduce our special guest because I'm very excited to talk to both of you as I run around and add more comfortable chairs to the stage. So I'm going to take that one and you two have nice padded chairs because I'm nice. I'm going to move. By the way, we are live.
Oh, okay. I made this movie because I met Bob Burns through Gary Kent. This is the subject of my first film, which is called Danger God. Gary is a B-movie legend. Oh, I should be talking to a microphone. Gary Kent is a B-movie legend, stuntman extraordinaire, and he was a friend of Bob Burns, and he introduced me to him. Gary, come on up. We'll say more. Come on up and join us. Bob Burns was doing an event at a blood bank in Austin, Texas. He had reached the 50-gallon level as a contributor. And they did an event honoring him and talking about all of his movies. And Gary invited me to be there, and I was a columnist for the Austin American Statesman at that time. And Bob gave me a copy of his script called Rondo and Bob. And after I made this movie about this guy and his career, I thought about it and realized that Bob Burns would make an interesting subject, but only if it is about his obsession with Rondo Hatton. Anyway, that's the story. And it's all his fault.
Yeah, hi, Gary.
Hi.
Oh my gosh, so this is really fun. I had a really great conversation before the show at Burst's house, where we have lots of our great pre-show conversations. And getting to know you, Gary, about the things you've done in my own personal, like you're wearing a Man from U.N.C.L.E. hat. Like I feel like you knew I was gonna nerd out about that and you wore it on purpose. But so what I really want to talk about, I'm gonna hand the mic to Joe so you both can talk for a second. Is first of all, you are in this. You show up in this documentary and you speak in it. Right. But earlier you mentioned that this film has been described as a love letter to the fans or fandom. I kind of want to talk about, in general, why you were to use the word obsession. I do want to think about like this love that we have for these stories, these wacky characters, and how they affect us in such a way that we become artists ourselves. We dedicate our lives to putting on events like this. We jump off of buildings or go on car chases like Gary. I think we want to focus on that love that you were talking about, because
Yeah.
ultimately that's what this documentary is about.
Yeah, and it's said in the movie at one point that there's a contrast between Bob Burns, who was a very normal-looking guy, who was quite weird and extraordinary and creative, and Rondo, who was a weird-looking guy who was very normal. He was an all-American kid, the athlete. He just wanted to be a coach, and things, acromegaly stepped in the way of that. And I think Bob looked at Rondo and saw his own inner ugliness, in Rondo's appearance. And so there was I don't know if I'm answering the question very well, but there was a love there. They never met, they didn't live in the same time period. He obviously did meet Mrs. Hatton, and that's all true. He went to Mrs. Hatton's house, which was covered with trophies because she was this big game hunter, which was fascinating. But it was an obsession that was about himself as much as anything else.
I gotta say, like, I see myself in that. I'm sure, like, the horror fans who are here see themselves in that. And why do we love monsters? I mean, don't we kind of relate, on some level to how those monsters are outcasts in a way that we kind of feel that we are?
Sure.
I mean, that's how I've always identified with them. How about you? Like, does that sound familiar to you? Like, you're a crazy thrill seeker.
Oh, me?
Yeah, you.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess so, I don't know, yeah, I love the
Did you
thrill.
like monster movies growing up?
Yeah, I loved them, especially Frankenstein, the original Frankenstein monster, Boris Karloff. I met Boris many years later, he was the nicest guy in the world. Boris Karloff, he grew championship roses and Bedlington Terriers, little dogs that he raised, so he was the nicest, he was the furthest thing from a monster you ever saw. But he created Frankenstein's monster, who lives to this day as one of the classic horror people.
Truly iconic.
Right.
What about you, Joe, in terms of how do you feel some recognition in yourself with that kind of love? Or like, what is your personal fascination that leads you to put together something like this? Because that's not an easy job either.
I have a background as a journalist and as a fiction writer, and the two of them kind of come together. And really, I have an obsession with telling the human story. And that's all I'm really interested in. So all of the other trappings are aiming for that goal with every project I do. And I don't know why that is, but that's what I'm after, human truth.
Do you think that there's something extra fascinating about finding humanity in something that is generally deemed inhuman?
Yes, yeah, I really do. In Austin, Texas, where I'm from, there was a movie shot 2013, 2014 called Joe, starring Nicolas Cage, Joe?
Oh, yeah.
The third lead in the movie was a guy who was a homeless person from the streets of Austin. And his name was Gary, blanking on his last name. I was obsessed with wanting to know why he was homeless. And I set out to write something about it. And it taught me a lot about who I am, I guess. And I pursued it until I found the answer to the question from talking to his sister. And she laid out the whole story of what had happened to him. He was a very smart guy. He had gone off in the Navy and went AWOL in Japan, was threatened, and he started in a downward spiral. Writing that story led me to, I guess, to my own obsessions in a lot of ways. Again, it's the human truth. I want to know about our failings. I don't think we care much about perfect people. We're more interested in their flaws and what makes them become who they are.
Specifically about Rondo, and what you were saying about we've been talking about finding humanity in things that are deemed, by a certain standard to be less than attractive.
Right.
One thing that I find fascinating is that in the kind of history of horror genre cinema, there are some horror titles that really are not horror films per se, but they offer something to the horror-loving audience that is very potent. So one of them, Rondo had appeared in for a few seconds, The Hunchback of Notre Dame being one. All versions of that, whether it's Lon Chaney or my favorite, the Charles Laughton version, those films have a real kind of potency amongst horror fans. The Elephant Man, David Lynch, is another one where, you know, you can see when Quasimodo or John Merrick are listed in lists of monsters with Frankenstein. It's kind of not, I mean, it would be like Rondo being listed as, it's not fair, it's kind of not nice, but the people making those lists don't view monstrous in the same way. How do you kind of, what do you think about that? Like for me, that's been a hard thing to reconcile.
Yeah. You know, Rondo is such an interesting guy because despite this condition he had, he was liked by people. He was very popular when he was a journalist in Tampa. Everybody knew him. And we tried to convey that a little bit. And you know, I don't think people were afraid of him, but he had to try to escape that a little bit. He had that deal with people crossing the street to avoid him. And he had to get past it. Rondo Hatton actually said, and I don't know if this is in the movie or not, but he talked about how he could cower and feel sorry for himself, or he could face it full on. And I think there's lessons from him about that, because I think he did have a happy life. And, you know, I talked with you about, you know, I had to cast this actress to play May Hatton. And the challenge was that we had to believe that she would love Rondo Hatton. And we have someone who I think is really incredible, Kelsey Probelski, who plays her, both as young and old. And I think she pulls it off.
She did. Did you want to say something more about that? Kelsey.
About Kelsey, I worked with Kelsey on another film called Virgin Cheerleaders in Chains or something like that.
Where she throws a big machete right in his chest.
Hits me right in the chest with a machete. But I love Kelsey. She's a good actress. So when Joe told me he was going to do this film and he was looking for a good actress, I suggested Kelsey.
And she has a look that I think looks like a period as well.
Right.
Before I ask if there are any questions from the seats, I do want to ask about the makeup. So you had the audacity. We talked about audacity. All right, this is a word I want everybody. This is like Sesame Street word of the day. All right. Yeah. I love the word audacity.
I call it stupidity.
Yes. Well, yeah, maybe. I don't know, but I love it. Like, take the first seasons of Doctor Who. Right? They had no resources, but we want to have aliens and monsters, and we'll use a trash bag if we have to. And Coleman, we talked about Coleman Francis, Ray Dennis Steckler. If you guys don't know those names, we've talked a lot. You worked with a lot of these filmmakers who scraped and did whatever they could. There's an audacity to, and they're not making movies where people are, you know, it's not My Dinner with Andre. They're making monster movies. There's audacity to that. And you show some audacity in this by having dramatizations of May as an older woman, by having the same actress in makeup, Rondo Hatton himself. Like that, talk about that makeup process. Clearly, like it was difficult for the actor to deliver lines in it. Can you talk about that?
It was tough for Rondo, and he got better as he went. But you know, it's a low budget movie. You got to give us some slack.
No, it's not slack. I'm actually praising it. I think that's
Kelsey herself, the actress Kelsey Probelski, said, "I know an older woman you can get to play this." And it's like, no, we got to do you. We found this guy. His name was Paul Smith, and Paul Smith had worked on Blood Simple, and he was kind of a protege of Bob Burns, protege and competition for Bob Burns, because Bob could do this kind of stuff. You know, Bob made the Chainsaw Mask. He could make this same stuff.
sounds a little like Rob Bottin and Rick Baker.
Yeah. So we got lucky. or I got lucky. I got lucky many times to making this movie, and I got lucky to get this guy. It was it's a tough process. I love the way that Manhattan turns out old.
That is one of the leaders, as a lot of people probably know, of creating old age in makeup is Dick Smith. Not related, I'm sure. But Dick Smith, one of the greatest makeup artists of our generation, or in the last decades, said that making someone older is the hardest thing to do. Yeah, so it's very, very impressive work.
And you see at the very end the photo of the actual Manhattan as an older woman, and that's like the only photo that exists. So and that was used to create it.
I want to open it up to the audience. Anybody have any questions, comments, lavishes of praise?
It was very touching that scene when they first met the bus stop. That was really nice. That was really sweet.
I'm gonna repeat that. He says,
Oh, it's
the bus
actually,
stop meeting was very touching.
what's not bus? They're outside the Gasparilla dance. Gasparilla is a big event still in Tampa, Florida, and it's kind of like a ripoff of Mardi Gras. Instead of crews, they have queens for different parties. So, as far as that's largely true, which is what I had to always say about all their recreations, but it's largely true that they met that way. And it's that moment. I mean, that's why I think Kelsey's such a great actress, and she pulled that off. I told her, I said, this is your scene. More than anybody else's is your scene. And I think she really pulled it off. So thank you.
Anyone else? Anyone learn something about Rondo or Robert Burns that they didn't know before?
Oh, so I have a question.
Ooh, I'm gonna run back. I'm gonna give you a mic. Yeah, we get to hear your audio.
So towards the end, when Bob was in Texas, they talked about him having this story and wanting to find this, younger woman and fall in love. Do you think that was inspired by what he learned about May and Rondo's love story, and he was kind of chasing it to some degree?
I think he was, yeah. I mean, Rondo found that happiness that Bob was not really capable of finding. He had relationships in his life. He was married. We did not know that Bob was married. You didn't know, right?
No.
We didn't know this, and his brother let it slip one day to me. It's like, what?
I didn't think it was important.
Yeah. Well, he didn't want to reveal things to me, which is difficult. So yes, I think it's very much a reflection of that. Again, Bob is the guy who couldn't find love, and Rondo is the guy who could find love. And so Rondo was a model for him, and a reflection. And in many ways in the movie, I think he's a reflection coming off of Bob.
Is there anything you feel like you, I don't know if I want to use the term learned, but that you understand kind of about the human condition after making this, and but that kind of very strange parallel between Rondo's life and Bob Burns' life, and how it seems like Bob's is in a way a little more tragic.
It is, yeah. And I think Bob felt he was cursed in some ways. That in his career, he was cursed. That he had, he made these movies that didn't quite, pan out for him. He had relationships that didn't pan out for him. And he felt very alone. Though and you see a little bit at the very end of his memorial service. That's video that we found out from that. And there were so many people there, but he felt like he had no friends. I mean, he talked to Gary about that.
Bob,
How about feeling alone and incapable of love?
Oh, yeah, Bob said, he used to call me all the time and we would meet for lunch. And I didn't know that Bob was ill at the time, but he always had this little bottle of white pills that he would take at lunch and make them turn off the air conditioning because he couldn't handle cold at all. In fact, he wrote an article for the Austin Statesman called "Give Me Shelter," where he wanted heat all the time. But Bob, he just couldn't, he said he finally figured out what his problem was, what, attention deficit disorder or something?
Attachment disorder.
Right, attachment disorder. He just couldn't really feel the feelings of other people, what they were feeling, or when they hurt, or when they needed cheering up, or whatever. He could not feel those, so he couldn't respond to it. And consequently, he had a hard time making friends and finding love in his life, which just really didn't happen.
So I have one more question about something that happens in the documentary, and it's funny that you bring up the "Give Me Swelter," because there's a line that Bob says in the documentary, which is that he loves this heat, you know?
Right.
And it happens as he's talking to a young Toby Hooper.
Yeah, and that is all true. So,
Yes, so that's exactly, I wanted to bring that up about that, the school shooting, and
Yeah.
that being part of what shaped probably both of their lives and experiences.
I don't know if people here know about the tower shooting very much, because it's a long time ago, but it was the first big school shooting. And this guy, Charles Whitman, got up on the tower, and he was just nuts. There was that, I don't think you know who Kinky Friedman is, probably. Kinky Friedman.
Yeah. You've got a
Kinky
history on
Friedman talks about a rumor of a tumor. He actually has a song about that. And there was a rumor of a tumor in his head, which I think was unfounded in the end. But I was just taken with the fact these guys were both there on that day. And these are the guys, these two people created Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A lot of people created it, really. But these two people were the creative forces behind it. And they, you know, they had their squabbles because of that, because they were both very strong personalities. But the notion that they were in something real when they would later go on to create something not real, you know, to me was fascinating.
Well, it's fascinating to me too, because when you hear kind of what's the word, academic readings of Texas Chainsaw, and really that whole era of horror filmmaking, so much of the anxieties are attributed to Vietnam, rightly so. But this is the first time I've really made the connection between this particular shooting. And I think that's very interesting. I'm wondering if that deserves further exploration, but
Yeah.
that's very interesting.
And we have the weird thing I have to do is because memory is fallible.
Yes.
And so we have Gary Kent telling the story that he says Bob told him, and then Bob's brother saying, "Oh no, that's not right." You know, and I love that notion that memory is fallible.
Rashomon.
Yeah. So truth is, you know, is it real? You know, it's just so hard to say.
Yeah, well, you know, we had the conversation during First House about Tim Burton's Ed Wood film, because we were just discussing biopics in general. And I will say that you did say that the way you formatted this film was largely inspired by the Becoming Bond documentary. Right?
Yeah, we can talk about that.
About the
Yeah,
recreation.
I saw Becoming Bond, which is George Lazenby documentary, and I was very taken with the fact that they basically had two parts. There's one, Lazenby sitting in a chair with a pretty background, which is the normal documentary thing, and the second part was recreation using an actor who didn't particularly look like him. And this is a low budget film, and so I had to get actors that, you know, and I went to a guy who was very helpful. He was the drama department chair at the community college in Austin. And he said, "I got one guy who looks like Bob Burns and one guy who's a good actor." So I said, "Give me the good actor," because I had watched Becoming Bob. And so I wasn't as concerned about him looking like Bob. I think he had a lot of the Bob down after a while. You heard some people imitating Bob actually talked like this. That he was a little precise in his speech, you know.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting, especially, I've done a lot of work. There's been suppositions in the documentary, particularly by some of Bob's relatives about possible Asperger's syndrome.
Right.
It's actually one of the possible,
Yeah.
like when I work with students who have Asperger's or on the spectrum of some kind, precise speech is one of the things that you will get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
was such a weird moment because we had Bob's brother, and the thing they were talking about was separation. He lived in Canada, still lives in Canada, and was just passing through town. And we were able to talk to him. And then I said, well, let's put his son up here and let him talk a little bit too. And we're in this very sparse apartment this boy lives in, this young man lives in. And there's like a stack of CDs, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see a bed in the bedroom. There was no other furniture. And then he started talking about, about Asperger's and his own experience. And I thought, wow.
Yeah. Again, we should be very clear, this is also supposition,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we should wrap it up. We've got one more documentary. Any other questions, comments? Give another, ooh, Folgers, I'm gonna bring you the remote microphone.
Wake us up, Folgers.
They both had rather tragic endings, I felt. How old were, or how close in age were they? when
Bob,
died?
Bob, when he died, was about 60, I think, or 61. And Rondo, I believe, was 54. I'm not, in that early 50s range, yeah. Rondo's body just gave out. The acromegaly is a horrible thing, and it is attacking the body constantly. And it's interesting because I think he might, if he could have survived for another 5 years, he would have been a big monster star. Because they had him pegged. They wanted him to be the next big monster. The whole creeper thing was accidental. That was the name of the character in the Sherlock Holmes movie, the Hoxton Creeper. And so they just played on that. So, we'll call him the Creeper. So he became the Creeper in the other two films, the other two big films.
All stuffed up, his shoulders all padded up like a football player. Well, I mean, this has been a real pleasure for me to talk about these films with both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I do want to tell everybody watching at home and here that for an independent film, the best thing you can do if you saw something and enjoyed it is to tell other people about it. And one of the best ways you can do that is to review it on IMDb or Letterboxd or any of those platforms. I'm sure this is on Letterboxd, and if it's not, we will put it there. I'm not sure if it's
I'm not
yeah.
sure.
Well, it will be, and we'll make sure. So yeah, send a review, tell your friends to review it, and get more eyeballs on it, and spread the word. But thank you so much.
Thanks,
Rondo
man.
and Bob. We'll take a brief break because I know you want to get a drink or use the restroom, but in a few minutes, we're going to start the second documentary, which is really not a documentary so much as a conversation with a man right before he died, Lucio Fulci. Very uncensored, very candid, not always pretty, but always honest. Thank you all so much. I'll see you in a few minutes. I'll probably see you outside. Thank you. Thank you both.
That was a good stud right there.
One day we'll get him back to talk about Robert Vaughn.
Here's your goodie bag for your purchases.
Yay! It's right here. My purdy goodie bag. And event. Thank you, everybody, for watching at home. Yeah, look here, it's Folgers. We're live. It's weird because it's on a delay, so you have to get used to it. It feels weird.
Right. All right.
Hey, look, it's Trevor Dillon, the manager of the Frida Cinema, making it on. It's so freaky. All right, I'm gonna put on my mask.